So LinkedIn's strong debut, along with Glencore's share sale this week, not forgetting that, signals strengthening confidence in the corporate world. A European survey from HSBC PwC supports that view. It found mid-market companies, those with annual revenues of up to €2 billion, are gearing up for ambitious growth targets. It also found that certain challenges are still holding them back, and these include getting hold of credit, meeting debt obligations and complying with new regulation. Perhaps the biggest obstacle is a lack of strategic awareness. The report says companies are collectively sitting on €120 billion of cash. They just don't know how to use it. John Casey is one of the authors of the report. He's HSBC's head of commercial banking for continental Europe, with responsibility for strategy and business performance across 18 markets. Joins me in the studio now. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming in. 120 billion euros of cash. There's a lot you could do with that money. Why aren't companies putting that cash to work?
Yeah, I think probably the last 2 years have seen companies be far more structured about their financing. They're protecting themselves through a financial crisis, but I think now we're starting to see forward thinking about what they do next with their money.
You've also said that European businesses have this renewed appetite for growth. What is driving this need to expand more aggressively now?
Yeah, I think if I give a couple of examples around that, I was in Turkey last week, and what we're starting to see is the opening out of markets from Europe out into Asia as well. So we had a particular forum there with a number of clients, about 150 clients, looking at the Chinese market. And I think if you take Turkey and China as a great example, by 2015 there'll be bilateral trade of about $15 billion, which is enormous. And so companies are seeing the opportunity, government-backed, which absolutely plays the appetite. And I think, secondly, we're starting to see acquisitions in Europe as well. So we're starting to see companies gearing up for where they go to in terms of the next stage. We've seen it particularly in France and in Germany in terms of acquisitions there.
What about the challenges, though? And I'm thinking, when it comes to finding ways to finance this growth, yes, there are some great opportunities out there, but there are also some challenges when it comes to pursuing those opportunities.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. I think what the report talks about, which I think is important, it's not just about working capital, it's also about other forms of finance as well. So you've got the opportunity, as long as companies have the right structures, to access the debt capital markets, to look at high-yield bonds, and to look at other forms of financing as well. So the report, the obstacle, I think, is about companies understanding the different types of structures there for them. And I think what we're trying to do is trying to actually introduce the concept for them to plan forward, because what you'll see in the report, the next 2 years will have a high amount of refinancing, but it will give companies the opportunity to restructure themselves.
But when it comes to obtaining financing, what are you seeing in terms of the interaction between banks in the corporate space? Because we are still in a very uncertain environment for the banks themselves. Is there a willingness on their part to be flexible when it comes to these things?
I mean, certainly, as I look across Europe, I see a lot of markets, and they're linked to international trade, because where companies are at the moment is they're looking for opportunities to grow their revenue. They've seen in some markets domestic growth is quite slow. You'll take some of the markets in Europe. If I take somewhere like Spain, which as an economy itself is a very slow growth market, but if you look at the international connectivity to that market, then we've been working with clients to help them expand into other markets. So one company we've been dealing with fairly recently, we've opened out 11 Latin American markets, which has enabled them to grow outside of their home country.
And when you speak about ways of accessing financing, you speak about going to the markets. I mean, again, we're seeing signs of uncertainty, instability at times, volatility. That's easier said than done as well, isn't it?
And that's why the report talks about a 2-year period to enable them to get themselves structured in the right way. I think the main challenge for companies is being able to tell their story in terms of a growth story and enable them to actually build a debt structure, which then enables them to broaden that out into far more wider capital market structures.
Is that what you mean by a lack of strategic awareness?
Yeah, it is. That's part of it. I think the report also concentrates on the involvement of finance and the strategic growth of companies. And I think what we have within the report is companies that have done really well to weather the storm over the last couple of years, but they now see the opportunity out there, and they now need some help in terms of articulating what that would look like for them, but also working with different advisors.
John Casey, HSBC, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.